person you're trying to communicate with. Some people want all the details. Others want only a broad outline. Some are moved by emotion. Some distrust emotion. Study your audience to determine if they are ready to listen, ready to follow. Henry David Thoreau said, "It takes two to speak truth, one to speak and another to listen." Is the person capable of understanding and accepting your message? One of the biblical proverbs puts it this way: rebuke a wise man and he'll love you. Rebuke a fool and he'll hate you. All people are not ready for all of your message all of the time. Many of my letters were explicitly designated confidential. I knew that the public at large was not capable of accepting and understanding some of my observations and comments. Study your audience to determine what is their attention span. If you have an auditor who has the time and is inclined to listen, lengthen it out, slowly as if from a jug. If you have a poor listener, hasten it, shorten it, shoot it out of a pop gun. Listen more than you talk. Shakespeare wrote, "Give every man thine ear, but few thy voice." It's better to let people think you're a jackass than to bray and remove all doubt. Some individuals can dazzle their listeners with their wit, with their French and Latin phrases, with their beautifully chosen words, but they're not effective communicators. Why? Because they do not know where the target is. They spend too much time talking themselves. By listening, you can learn what other people are interested in, what their needs are, what are their sources of information, where their prejudices lie. Principle 8. Convince the audience that you're a friend who has their best interest at heart. When you speak in public, you'll be most effective if you think of yourself not as making a speech, but as someone coming to talk with friends about a subject that's important to them. My election to the presidency came at a time when the nation was edging closer and closer to civil war. Here's what I said: we're not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. I once made some remarks to a temperance society in Springfield about the best way to deal with people who have a problem with alcohol. I began by reminding them of an old saying: a drop of honey catches more flies than a gallon of gall. Then I advised, if you would win a man to your cause, first convince him that you are his sincere friend. On the contrary, assume to dictate to his judgment, or to command his actions, or to mark him as someone to be shunned or despised, and he will retreat within himself. He will close all the avenues to his head and his heart. Such is man, and so must he be understood by those who would lead him, even to his own best interests. Perhaps the greatest compliment I was ever paid was that I was a kind man. Through kindness, you can sometimes avoid turning an opponent into an enemy. There's a big difference. An enemy may agree with your idea, yet oppose you. An opponent may disagree with your idea, yet still like you. And your opponent of today may become your ally tomorrow. It's well known that I'm in favor of short statutes of limitation in politics. I tried to be kind even when I was being abused. Once Governor H.R. Gamble of Missouri wrote me a very hostile letter. He accused me of insulting him publicly and of making remarks that were unbecoming my office. So I personally scribbled some notes on the envelope to him. Quote, "My private secretary has just brought me a letter from you saying it is very cross. As I'm trying to preserve my temper by avoiding irritants, I have declined to read your cross letter. I was totally unconscious of any malice or disrespect towards you, or of using any expression which should offend you. I tried not to match emotions with anyone, especially anyone who was in a bad temper. Once I received a letter from General Hunter, who formerly had a conspicuous assignment in the East. When he was given a command in Kansas, he sent me a sizzling letter. He said, 'I am deeply mortified, humiliated, insulted, and disgraced.'" How's that for a string of words? "I'm sent into banishment with not 3,000 effective men under my command, while one of the brigadier generals is in command of 100,000 men in Kentucky." I replied, "Dear General Hunter, I have been and am sincerely your friend. But I am constrained to say that it is difficult to answer so ugly a letter in good temper." I then went on to explain to him that I considered his assignment an honorable and an important one. And I signed the letter, "Your friend as ever, A. Lincoln." But timing is important. So I sent it to the general by special conveyance and instructed the person to deliver the letter to the general when he was in a good temper. I always sought to express myself in a way that would spare the other person embarrassment or avoid injuring their feelings. Robert Dale Owen, who was a believer in spiritualism, once cornered me. He insisted that I listen to an excerpt from a book he was writing. Afterward, he asked me what I thought of it. I said, "Well, for those who like that sort of thing, I should think this is just about the sort of thing that they would like." Which reminds me of a man who came to Washington to see if he could get a pass to go through the lines to Richmond. I told him I'd be happy to issue him a pass if my passes were respected, but they weren't. For over 2 years, I've been issuing passes to 250,000 soldiers in the Army of the Potomac to go to Richmond. Not one of them's gotten there yet. Kindness is not weakness. Kindness is in the spirit of what you do. You can be kind when you're saying no, or when you're criticizing, or reproving. Words are never put to better use than in the form of a compliment. A well thought out compliment, clothed in just the right words, presented at an appropriate time and place, can be cherished for a lifetime. The ability to communicate in a kind manner is especially critical in dealing with those who love you. Kindness grows out of sympathy for the other person, a we feeling that you have some sense of their joy, their struggle, their pain. But kindness, to be kind, must be expressed tactfully. One of the most difficult tasks is to say something to someone who is dealing with pain or death, to write a letter of consolation. In 1864, I sent this letter to a war mother, a Mrs. Lydia Bixby. Dear Madam, I have been shown in the files of the War Department a statement that you are the mother of 5 sons who have died gloriously on the field of battle. I feel how weak and fruitless must be any words of mine which should attempt to beguile you from the grief of a loss so overwhelming. But I cannot refrain from tendering to you the consolation that may be found in the thanks of the Republic they died to save. I pray that our Heavenly Father may assuage the anguish of your bereavement and leave you only the cherished memory of the loved and lost and the solemn pride that must be yours to have laid so costly a sacrifice upon the altar of freedom. Yours very sincerely and respectfully. Principle 9. Consider the consequences of your message. Think about your message long and hard before you speak or write. Give no unexamined thought your voice. Work your way through your doubts. I was a slow thinker, but I was even slower about communicating ideas that were not thought out. There will be times when you will want to take great pains to avoid being misunderstood or misquoted. Here are 2 words of advice. First, say nothing. This is especially good advice when you don't know what to say, or when the occasion is volatile and anything you say might ignite it. That was the case just before I took the office as president. The move toward secession had already begun. The disunionists were looking for any comment that might be seized to justify what they were doing. So I avoided public comments, replying that my position had already been made abundantly clear in previous remarks, debates, and speeches. The second word of advice is, sometimes write out your comments. I often spoke without notes. Even though I did a great deal of research for my debates with Judge Douglas and compiled a reference book full of information and quotes, I seldom used it on the platform. However, after I became president, I had to be more cautious. During the war, it was rather common for serenades to take place at the executive mansion, and I and other high-ranking officials would often be asked to make a few remarks. Sometimes these remarks would be butchered when they appeared in the newspapers. So my secretary, John Hay, took to writing out the night speeches as I gave them. For at least one serenade, I wrote out my remarks in advance and read from a manuscript. As a communicator, you have the power within you to bring out the devil or the angel in your audience. Just beneath the surface of individuals and nations reside resentments, fears, and angers. These can easily be stirred up. But you will also find an ample supply of kindness, generosity, heroism. I always tried to appeal to that side of human nature. When I delivered the first inaugural address, I stated, "The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature." Learn how to appeal to the better angels whenever you can. Shortly before my assassination, I told my cabinet, "I hope there will be no persecution, no bloody work after the war. None need expect me to take part in hanging or killing them. Enough lives have been sacrificed. We must extinguish our resentments if we expect harmony and union." The Civil War might have been followed by an orgy of vengeance and widespread hangings, wounds that might never have healed had I not pled for forgiveness and reconciliation. Think about the impact your message will have before you deliver it. Keeping your objective in view will help you guard against excesses of emotion. If you're tempted to say something harsh to somebody, ask yourself, what will an angry message accomplish? Will it destroy the relationship? Will it produce an angry reaction? Or will it generate positive results? Let me tell you about a letter I never sent. This letter was written to General Meade shortly after the victory at Gettysburg. His soldiers had inflicted a deep wound in Lee's army, and Lee had retreated to the Potomac, which had overflowed its banks. With a decisive move, the war might have ended then and there. But Meade did not pursue Lee aggressively. By the time he did, the waters had subsided and Lee's army had escaped. Here's what I wrote. My dear General, I do not believe you appreciate the misfortune involved in Lee's escape. He was within your easy grasp, and to have closed upon him would, in connection with our other late successes, have ended the war. As it is, the war will be